Today on Hot Rod Unlimited, we're going to talk about evolution. Specifically, we're going to talk about the evolution of the Corvette and how it developed from just a concept in 1953 into one of the few cars that thrills fans of racing and luxury, sports cars and hot rods. I've hitched a ride in a 57 Corvette to meet up with some other Corvette enthusiasts at the Petersen Automotive Museum in Los Angeles to celebrate something special.
You never want to forget an anniversary. We're not going to forget Corvettes. It's the big 6-0. There's Corvettes here from every generation, so let's go check them out.
The Petersen is having a special exhibit to debut the brand new C7 Corvette, which is here in Los Angeles for the very first time. And along with the C7, they've got Corvettes from all the different generations going back to the C1. Corvette was introduced as a show car in 1953 at the New York Motorama, and it was so popular it was produced for sale the very same year. It was an innovative car. Its fiberglass construction and European styling cues made it a real departure from all GM's previous offerings. For an inside perspective, we're meeting up with Kirk Bennion, Exterior Design Manager for Corvette.
This car that we're standing next to is a 1953 Corvette. This is the EX122 prototype, and it is one of the very first Corvettes. I believe it's one of the first that was later fitted with a V8 engine for study. Some of the things that we've learned through the years on Corvette and that are still applicable to the modern performance car are the fact that the car, for instance, has very short front overhangs, integrated headlamps, and those are still qualities that we try to embellish and embrace in the newer car. I would also tell you for the front end of this car, the forward-facing grille. You know, we've watched Corvette evolve from a forward-facing grille to a bottom breather. Now it's back to the prominent grille, and that's really been, as we've learned from our race team, that's been very beneficial to the car in achieving lower lift in the front. Also, what was key on this car was its fiberglass construction, which was very new for its day. Corvettes in that time were all convertibles. It's just whether you had a soft top or you had a hard top. But the hard tops you had did have a quarter glass, a glass that was another additional glass that was behind the side glass. And this is something that we looked at for the C7. You know, we had the basket handle for many years, but we felt that we needed to push the car further. And we really felt that having a quarter glass was part of our lineage with Corvette. So that was something that we felt we could leverage, but in a new modern way.
The second generation Corvette in '63 was the first year of a coupe, and also of the Stingray name. GM upped the power, introduced the independent rear suspension, and another beloved Corvette feature, hideaway headlamps. Many Corvette enthusiasts consider the C2 to be one of the most beautiful cars ever made.
C2 was a significant year. Obviously, as you know, that car was heavily based on the 1959 Stingray race car that Bill Mitchell had campaigned in that. But what was really key about that car was its styling leap. Even to this day, it resonates with collectors. The C2 really benefits from having its 5 initial Z06 Grand Sport derived race cars. And those cars are still iconic, still influential. They cross the line between street car, race car, and introduce a whole lot of performance-driven functions into the design. They're probably the first car that really take on this track-enabled performance through modifying its body panels, through adding things that'll help keep certain elements cool, allowing for a wider tire. You know, these were really our first big wide body cars. These early Grand Sports are very significant to Corvette's past. They're things that we try to embrace even today.
In 1968, the Corvette changed again to the long-running Mako Shark design. The C3 brought back the Stingray in '69 and introduced the ZL1. Later C3 designers faced some challenges in the '70s as stricter safety and emission laws affected both performance and aesthetics.
We still felt the Corvette was compelling enough to embrace that Stingray name from '63, so we kept it on into the C3s. Now the difference is that Stingray in a C2 is 2 words. It's Stingray. But then when we got to '69, Stingray became 1 word. For C7, Stingray is neither one of those. We ended up doing Stingray with 1 word, capitalizing both the S and the R. When we got to '78, where now the car became a pace car, it got a really nice facelift, integrated the front spoiler into the fascia, integrated the rear spoiler into the rear fascia as well. So now all your aerodynamic aids became integral to the design. I always kind of look at '78 as a key year where Corvette racing and Corvette the street car kind of crossed over and shared its learnings into that single car. The last C3 I think is the very best as far as drag coefficient and pitch moment. That's like your best combination to get for that era.
In the 80s, Corvette designers experimented with new technology, including rack and pinion steering, larger brakes and tires, and tune port injection. The C4 also revisited the Grand Sport name with a special edition in 1996.
The C4 Corvette really represents Corvette's biggest leap in aerodynamics. A new revised platform, things like the clamshell hood, state-of-the-art lighting. That was a very compelling car and very right for its time. We're clearly in our bottom breather mode. You know, the radiators actually tip back. The air is coming up under the fascia, then back out through the engine.
The C5 in 1997 was one of the most radical changes to the Corvette since its introduction. The frame was redesigned, the transmission became a transaxle, and the engine was a completely redesigned all-aluminum V8.
The C5 Corvette had the challenge of having to better C4's aerodynamics. When you start getting down to these really low CD targets, it requires a lot of time in the wind tunnel. And for C5, that had probably the most hours in the wind tunnel, getting it to surpass the C4's aerodynamic portion. It got the wider track, it got basically the track of a ZR1, enabled 17 and 18-inch wheels, which were real big for those days.
The C5 was a great car, but the C6 has been amazing. Better looking, better performing, and one of the most sophisticated American cars ever built, with copious amounts of high-tech materials and aerodynamic design elements, not to mention absolutely outrageous amounts of horsepower.
When you get into C6, now it's evolving a little bit more where we're becoming more lift conscious. You know, it isn't just taking drag off the vehicle. Much like our 53, it's taking in air in the front, but much like our C4, it's taking a little bit of air in the bottom. So it's kind of a hybrid bottom breather, forward-facing breather. Once we went to a projector, an HID projector, you can't move or rotate a projector headlamp. To get that brighter lamp technology, you had to go to a fixed lamp position, so that was very significant. It was an interesting controversy for us internally to watch. Wait a minute, it's not a real Corvette unless I have hidden headlamps. Then all of a sudden you had an uprising with your C1 camp that said, wait a minute, you mean we're not a real Corvette because we have exposed headlamps? ZR1 ended up, being our fastest, most aerodynamic car for that time. With that said, we'll move on now to the C7.
Every new generation of Corvette has pushed the boundaries of American design and performance. The 2014 Corvette has been eagerly awaited, not only because it's been 8 years since we've seen a totally new one, but also because Chevrolet is bringing back the Stingray name.
The reuse of the Stingray name was very important to us. This idea we've kind of had on the shelf in the studio, but we really felt that the car had to have a compelling, unique aesthetic to deserve that name. We've talked about some of the performance qualities, aesthetic qualities of Corvettes through the years. We've embraced some of those same qualities. For instance, here we are, we have short overhangs, integrated headlamps, something we saw in 53, still very key to Corvette's formula. Forward-facing grille, raised hood, functional hood scoop. We talked about that in the early Grand Sports. 57 was a key year, I think, and it really ignited Corvette's performance. Having the small block available in fuel injection, we still have that same small block. It's totally revamped, totally modern in every way. Active fuel management, direct injection, variable valve timing, 6.2 liters, 450 horsepower. This is the best starting point for horsepower that Corvette has ever had.
So, GM seems to have given us an impressive new car, with styling nods to previous generations and plenty of horsepower. It's certainly interesting from the outside, but we can't wait to get behind the wheel. Hint, hint, GM, come on, let us drive it.